My most creative times, as you're mentioning it, are in the afternoon, where yours is different.
Mine is definitely first thing in the morning. And I find that if I can quarantine myself in some area before the kids get up, and I get like 3 solid hours of good work in, and that's my time, my writing, my creative time.
This is Brent Richardson, and welcome to the Business Minutia Podcast, where our focus is on the details of business that are often passed over by traditional classes and leadership training. We focus on the stories of real people who have tried, failed, and learned through their experiences and are willing to share their lessons with others. So you're working from home. And maybe you do it some, but maybe you're not an expert, but you're becoming an expert right now because you're being forced to work from home. Are you being forced? You're used to being forced to work from home.
Absolutely. I've been here 15 years, every day.
So I have with me this week my producer, Jamie, and we're going to be talking about working from home, something that we've got quite a bit of experience with, and all of us are probably getting quite a bit of experience with, hopefully if you're still gainfully employed. And if you're not, think about starting something from home because there's no reason you can't work from home. So we're going to talk about what not to do. And sprinkled in there, we're going to talk a little bit about what to do from our experience of doing this for many, many years. I'm more productive at home. How about you?
Well, except when you're here. Sometimes my productivity goes down just a little bit.
I think it goes both ways. That goes both ways. Like I find my commute time is gone, but my commute time is filled with working on the tractor, working on some kid's bike, working on some RC car. There's like a stack of things that consume my time. But I find I'm working more than I was when I was in the office. So I've taken that commute time and filled it with work.
The distractions perhaps are not less annoying, but they're more productive.
Probably so, yeah. But I still, I think, and it's one of those things where initially you're like, oh, this is great. I get to work from home. That means I can just be in my bathrobe all day. Or that means I can skip this or do that, or I don't have to drive. But I also find that you can do that for about a week. And then you realize, okay, I need some structure.
You no longer feel human.
Yeah, you start to feel like the teenager that's been on a binger for 3 weeks or something. I don't know. Teenagers been a college kid,
Let's go with college.
I was thinking of teenage kids playing video games for 3 weeks and doing nothing but eating pizza. And
we have one of those.
Yeah, and their bedroom smells like feet and butt. So you don't want to get to a point like that. You eventually will realize, all right, I need a little bit of structure. So let's talk about how to fail at working from home. Maybe first, and then we'll get into some points. So maybe first, let's talk about what about your home office setup? How important is that in terms of your productivity and it not smell like feet and butt?
Oh, for me, it's absolutely number one. I have to have my office set up in a place where there's no distractions, and depending upon the age of the kids at the time, distractions were in many different colors and shapes. Sometimes the distraction is a kid needing a nap. Sometimes the distraction is a kid needing food. Sometimes the distraction is a kid needing help with homeschool because I homeschool my 3 not so little ones anymore. So yeah, distractions are huge for me. I've got to have my back to the door. I can't see their faces. And
there's a lot of people out there homeschooling right now for the first time ever. That's
right.
Something that we've been doing mostly just to make you feel really awkward. Right. I stole that, I think, from Gaffigan. But yeah, I think most of the time you hear people talk about homeschooling their kids, it's because they have a certain amount of social awkwardness by themselves, and they want their kids to be isolated from the rest of the world. We don't do that for that. We homeschool for academic purposes.
Well, and really, the distant learning that all these parents are being stuck with right now is not the same thing as homeschooling at all.
Also,
I mean, our kids are as isolated as everyone else's kids. They can't see their friends.
Yeah.
We have co-ops, and we have hangouts, and we have libraries and museums and all of that kind of stuff that we can do. But we can't
supplement
do it right now.
a lot of community or a lot of things outside of the house socially to keep the kids from being able to you want them to be able to carry on a conversation with somebody and not be these crazy socially awkward kids.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we do a lot of that, and our kids are not getting that right now, and they're quite frustrated, right?
Yeah.
So You carve out this space. You said your back is to the door. That's the opposite of me. And you're going to get this a lot in this episode. We're opposites, and we're talking about this intentionally to say there is no recipe for how to go do this other than figuring yourself out. If you can figure you out, which I think is the key to this conversation, if you can figure yourself out, which is probably the key to a bunch of stuff, right? But this certainly for this.
Well, and it really takes trial and error. You try something, you can't be afraid to fail. You just have to be willing to transition to something else.
So tell me about your office setup. Your back is to the door,
right?
Which to me, I just can't stand. I don't know if it's like the inner Jack Reacher in me, or the guy who's like there's a self-defense mechanism that kicks in. That's like, I want my face to the door so I can see what's coming in. But in your case, if you do that, you're never getting anything done.
Well, our youngest is 12, and he has a tendency to interrupt no matter what. So I have a sign that hangs on the door when I am doing my office hours, and it says, Mom is working, is this urgent? And there is always a rule of, if you interrupt me and there's not blood or bone, then you are going to end up getting an extra chore.
Consequences and repercussions.
Absolutely. You got to teach them, just like with toddlers and everything else. Sure. Even as teenagers, I'm still teaching them to respect that time. But he will come by and he'll glance in the door just to kind of see, is Mama really busy right now, or can I interrupt her? Yeah. And if I see that, I am going to look at him and say, can I help? Is there anything I can do for you? Yeah. So I just don't need to see it.
And I can appreciate, I can't have distractions in front of me. Like, I don't need TV and stuff like that on. I need to be in a place that is isolated, dedicated for that. That's the important piece to me. Is my brain, I can kind of adapt to whatever environment or area I'm in. I could office. I have my office currently in my shop where we're recording, and this is a spot where I do a lot of other things. So I have woodworking. I've got working on tractors. I've got stuff with utility vehicles. I've got something always going on. We have an amateur hobby farm, so I'm always fixing or working on something, or I'm building something. So in the corner of that shop, I have a dedicated area, and it needs to be that space. I can't have it over where I'm used to doing woodworking and where there's tools, because inevitably I'll grab a couple of tools and I'll start working on something. So I have a dedicated area. I can also do that upstairs. We're fortunate to have that space. We have different locations, but I do have to have them consistent. They need to be consistent areas where these are the 3 available spaces for me to work. And it's nice to have that flexibility, but I do have to have some consistency there. It can't be, this is the same place where I do my side hustle work, and this is also the same place where I do my my corporate stuff. I have to have that firewall or that kind of separation. Otherwise, I will just roll right through whatever I was supposed to be working on.
Right. And when I initially started working from home, we didn't have that much space. So I had my laptop, and I would kind of carry it wherever I was at the time. Sometimes I was working on the dining room table. Sometimes I had a small desk set up in our bedroom. The problem with the bedroom for me was that anytime I am trying to sleep, I can see the work that needs to be done, and I can't really get into the mojo of being able to sleep. Or I'm sitting there at the computer trying to get some work done, and I'm like, a nap would sound really good right now. And if I had it on the dining room table, then you just had kids running all over you all the time. So I had to look at it strategically and try to figure out, okay, where am I going to be most efficient in working at right now?
Yeah, so to fail at this, you want the most distraction you can possibly have. You want to set, and these are all things that we've done. You want to be set up to where screaming kids, Jack Russell Terriers, everything else is creating as much noise and distraction for you as possible, not to mention conference calls, which we'll talk about in a moment. But you also want to be in a spot where you can have like the worst possible Wi-Fi, like 56K modem kind of 1995 technology connection. That's if you really want to fail, that's the way you do it, so that when you do get on that phone, you sound like a cyborg and nobody has any idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. Have you ever had a cyborg conversation?
I have had some cyborg. I was called a cyborg by a vice president as he hung up on me. Yeah, but it was warranted. Our internet connection was awful, and I was in a place that of the house, it was the worst possible location to work, but it was isolated, and so that's why I chose it, but without the Wi-Fi connection. So it's like this, you need this Venn diagram of all these pieces together.
It's really crazy, yeah.
And I brought up that I don't have one dedicated space. I wanted to bring that up because there's a lot of folks out there that don't have this dedicated space.
Right.
They don't have that. They have a kitchen table. That's as best they're going to get. And, that kitchen table may not be a distraction-free environment, but 2-3 hours out of the day.
Well, but that's the key, is figuring out those 2 or 3 hours.
I agree.
When the kids were little, I mean, my most productive work time was when the kids were asleep.
Yeah.
I had a couple of years where the kids were actually at a preschool or something like that, and then that gave me, it was like, oh, wow, there are like 4 straight, uninterrupted hours. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I brought them all home. I'm not sure what
Well, let's talk about it, because you bring up a really good point, which is that, kind of the premise of the episode is that there's no recipe. And one of the things that I love and I hate it is I see a lot of the other stuff that, there's a lot of really good leadership development and coaching podcasts and videos and all these great content that's out there. And one of my favorite guys to watch and learn from is Jocko. Jocko Willink is this former Navy SEAL, and you just look at him and you go, don't cross that guy. That guy could destroy me, probably without touching me, right? He's just bad news. And if you'll follow any of his social media stuff, you'll see this guy is up at 4:30 almost every morning just getting after it. So he's up in the morning, he's hitting his workout, he's doing this, and I've never heard him directly say, this is the recipe, this is how you have to do it. But I've heard tons of people that latch onto that's the success measure. This is what you have to do. And maybe if you're type A and you're that person, that's great. That has never been me. I am not the get out of bed in the morning and I'm guns blazing attacking the day. My most creative times, as you're mentioning it, are in the afternoon, where yours is different.
Mine is definitely first thing in the morning. And I find that if I can quarantine myself in some area before the kids get up, and I get like 3 solid hours of good work in, and that's my time, my writing, my creative time. And if I wait and try to put that off until later in the day, it just won't happen, and it won't be as good even if I can find the quiet.
Yeah.
I think the key is trying to figure out when you are best at being creative. And it doesn't have to just be writing. I mean, you have creative stuff.
How would a person know that? Yeah, I agree. I think it's independent of whether you're writing software code. It's any kind of thing that requires critical thought.
Right.
Right. If it requires more than, 10, 15 minutes of really deep thinking, right? Which is, there's most jobs have some element of that, right? I realize there's some jobs that don't. That's a separate challenge. You're probably not working from home if you have those, but it's possible. But a lot of jobs do have that. Maybe you haven't done that kind of work in a while, and you might should. But having that that time to have that in-depth thought, how do you pull that off? How do you know when your brain works best to attack those kinds of problems?
I think I initially discovered my creative times when I was in college, and it was totally accidental. But I realized that if I took my literature classes, my writing classes, that kind of thing, first thing in the morning, then I did better at them. So then I found that I was putting all my favorite classes at the beginning of the day. The problem was, since that's the time that I thought the best, that's when I should have been doing the things that I struggled with.
Right.
I should have been doing my math, and I should have been doing the science and that kind of thing.
I need to take English in the morning or in the afternoon in my case, where I'm thinking the clearest, because I have my best chance of pass this class.
And there is an old book about eating the frog.
Yeah.
It's the same type of thing. What is it that are you going to need to get out of the way first thing in the morning? For me, it's first thing in the morning. And I feel better about my day if I know that I have already knocked out that on my to-do list.
Yeah, it's a very popular book that that people refer to. If you have not heard of the book, the concept is basically, if you had to eat a frog every day, you should do it first thing in the morning. That's the premise of it. I'm the opposite. I mean, in this case, I get it. If you had to suffer through pain of eating a raw frog, I'm going to eat it first thing just to be done with the day.
Suck it up, Buttercup.
I will say that I got like a chapter or two into that book and was done with it. It just didn't fit me.
Yeah.
I need something a little more maybe tangible than frog eating. But the concept I understood. I get. And for me, it's afternoon is when my creative thought is. And, and I asked the question, how do you know when that creative thought is for a person? I don't have a great answer, but one thing that did occur to me, I was reading this book by Brene Brown. I wish I could remember. I don't know if it's Courageous Leadership or one of the other. I can't. I'll
We've
look
read
it
so
up.
many of hers.
She's got some good books. She's a qualitative analyst. It's worth a read sometime. But one of the things she talks about is healthy play, that it's good for you to, it's kind of talking about work-life balance and psychologically people who are happier take part in healthy play. And what does healthy play look like? And when I remember reading it thinking, yeah, I do those things, I think. But the more I read about it, I was like, okay, that's how do you tell when you're, and she does a good job of breaking it down to say, if you're doing something, of course, you're talking about play, things that are not part of your work and your daily routine from a work or washing clothes or whatever,
Right.
those types of things.
Right.
But your healthy play are things that you do that are playful, that are enjoyable, that you lose track of time. That's an interesting thing I thought about because I realized, okay, mountain biking, woodworking, those are things that I will totally lose track of time, and it can be 10 o'clock at night. It can be good and bad. It can be a good thing because you lose yourself in it, and it's a restorational thing. It can be a bad thing if you don't control your time, right? But I also think it's interesting that the time of the day when you're working on maybe not playful things, but your work stuff where you lose track of time and you can really get lost in what you're doing, that's a pretty good indicator to me of the time of the day that I'm most creative.
Well, and I think also it's what time are you usually daydreaming? What time are you kind of losing your mind in fantasizing about goals or your future or thoughts like that?
That's interesting.
Because that's when you are being creative.
Well,
right?
maybe it's different for creative versus, I don't know. Yeah, because to me, I'm probably daydreaming right before I go to bed. I don't know. But it's possible that that's you have to figure that out for
Right.
yourself. I
Exactly
think is
right.
really what we're saying. You've got to structure, and then structure your day, structure your home, your office environment, and your time around those things. So if you've and these are, and it's going to be complicated, especially if you've got kids at home. You're going to need to juggle it around their schedule too. And it is this Venn diagram of, okay, this is the time I think the best and I'm most creative. Here's the time that my kids are, a massive distraction. Here's when and you got to find those windows.
Right, and there's a huge advantage to being able to work from home, especially with kids and being able to homeschool the kids because we have set up our schedule, our day, our lives. They don't realize it, but they are totally living on my schedule.
Let's talk about conference calls. Okay, so this is some of my favorite viral videos that get passed around and sent, or the meme writers are really doing well for themselves right now. But some of my favorite videos are people on conference calls. There's my all-time favorite is and this is several years old. This is not a recent COVID-19 thing, but a guy, I think he was interviewing for BBC News, and he had a home office set up, and his kids come in behind. We'll post a link to the video underneath on the website. But and the kids come in, and the poor wife is trying to drag kids out. I love it. Right. Those are that's a classic conference call gone wrong.
Oh yeah.
Right. So how to fail with conference calls. Let's talk a little bit about your favorite conference call failure.
Mine for myself was I was on the phone with an international nonprofit, definitely being the low person on the totem pole. And first time I was ever actually invited to one where the president, everybody is on the phone. And I didn't turn my computer on mute. And all of a sudden a rooster started crowing in the background. And all of these professionals are calling in from their universities and their big offices. I'm the only one that's working from home. And the president stops the person who's talking and says, "Who has a rooster in their office?" Immediate shame. Immediate shame. I felt like I was a con and I shouldn't have been on the call.
How can you be professional and have roosters?
Absolutely.
Well, anybody listening to our podcast recognizes there will be roosters in the background.
Birds,
guineas,
kids.
Potentially kids. And some things I'll edit out. Those I'm not, because that's kind of part of where we are and who we are.
Yeah, once you realize that those are the kinds of things that make you real and relatable, then you can embrace them a little bit more.
I mean, my favorite is the video I mentioned, but I've got tons of internal inside of my corporate job stories where one of the traditions that we have, I say tradition, is just a common thing that everyone will do when you get a new laptop is you'll tape the camera. Just because the ones who don't inevitably will hear other people make fun of them or talk about the horror stories of people who've come out of the shower in their bathrobe sitting on conference calls.
Goodness
only
gracious.
to get text messages and say, "Hey, bro, you're in your robe. You might want to throw some
Right.
tape on that camera,
Right.
please.
Well, and Saturday Night Live played on this. They did a live feed from home, and most of it was kind of hit or miss. But there was one where they had the secretaries on the conference call,
That's
and
pretty
that
great.
was
That's pretty great.
fantastic.
Very relatable. Anybody that's been on Zoom calls or conference calls at home these days, it's inevitable you're going to have some of that. Which does bring me to one of the things that I'll talk about. If you want to fail at conference calls, these are good examples. One way to fail, to me, again, this might be a little controversial, is never use your camera. Leave your webcam off all the time, and use when you're presenting. Use terms like over here and this way with hand gestures that nobody can see, so that nobody has any clue what you're talking about. Right. So why does having the camera on make a difference? That's probably something most people are not doing or trying to avoid.
Right. And I think that part of it is seeing the facial expressions when you're having a conversation with someone. If you can see my face, then you can kind of know where I'm coming from. It's the same way as misunderstanding a text message. You might as well just be sending text messages if you don't actually are using the body language and the facial expressions when you talk. Now, do you find that if you turn on your camera, does everyone else turn on their camera?
It is motivational for other people. They usually will. They're probably reluctant and don't want to. That's why I say it's controversial. Some people just like, come on, man, I don't want to use a camera. It actually makes you feel less isolated. If you get the camera on, you feel less isolated. You can see people. Or here's another good way to fail. Wait till somebody starts talking and talk at the exact same time. And then wait, like pause for a couple seconds. And then when they start talking, talk again, louder. And then insist that they go first. And when they start, hijack their conversation one more time, but don't stop this time and just march right over them. So if you're seeing the picture I'm painting, this is like every conference call every day.
It sounds like our family dinners.
It is also our family dinners. Competitive communication. But with the camera on, I find it to happen much less frequently because you can see people's motions. You can tell someone's about to talk, or do something. You can,
that makes sense.
And you'll pause, or people will wave a hand. And now you can also structure meetings that way, in such a way that you can have people raise a hand or something. I've seen some like that where it's a little more.
Now, where do you stand on the mute versus unmute?
Like, for me, if my phone is unmuted, I'm more engaged in the conversation. If my phone is muted, here's a good way to fail. Just mute your phone and watch cat videos all day, right? It probably won't be long before you're fired. Because eventually that's going to show up, and whatever your job is, you're not getting any throughput.
Right.
So the more engaged you can be in your work, the better it's going to be, right? So if you're trying to really put everything into it like you should be doing, or maybe think about another career, if you're really invested in that, you should be, the more you can have your camera on, the more your phone is. Now, let me be clear. There are some meetings that I got to listen in on, right? And they're not critical, that I don't need to be heavily engaged. And for those, I'm probably just a distraction for people to look at my, furry bald head, during the conference call. And so
Right.
I don't bother with those cases. But if you know which meetings you need to be engaged in and which ones you don't. Right?
Well, maybe a rule of thumb is if you would be engaged, if it was a person-to-person call, if it was a person-to-person in the same room, then you should probably be just as engaged on the call.
That's right. And that's why I say I think the camera on, because I'm in a meeting, I am engaged. If I'm in a meeting with people and I'm sitting in a meeting in a room full of 8-9 people, I'm not going to be sitting there looking at cat
your
videos.
phone. Exactly right.
I'm not going to do
It would
that.
be considered rude.
And my contribution to the meeting is different, right? And you learn, you kind of know that, right? So I think that does help.
Yeah.
What about some of the, how for the calls and with the cameras on? How do you space yourself out with the camera? Does it matter? Like, should I get as close as I possibly can so you can count my nose hairs? Should I be like...
You should probably take care of the nose hairs.
Should I be in the dark corner? Hey,
Quarantine.
The older I get, the more I realize that hair is conserved, okay? It's a conservation of hair principle. It's not... you lose it in some places, but it just comes out in other places you don't want.
So much.
Right? But it doesn't vanish. It just comes out places you'd prefer it not be, and you don't understand why it's there. But you get it. It's just here's some free hair.
Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome. So if you learn nothing else, you got that, right? But yeah, I think if you can get a good spacing. Look at yourself in the camera. At least with the software that we use, I can see myself in the camera before I go live. That's pretty good. That way you can make sure the nose hair situation's on point. get your spacing down, right? So that people can actually see you. Not just your face, not just the head. I like to back up so you can get some shoulders and get body gestures. And
right, and the
get a good
lighting
spacing.
is a huge thing on some of these Zoom calls.
It is, and I need to fix mine. My actual lighting, I'm looking at right now, is not great. I've improved it, but it's got to get better.
Now, is it better to have, I mean, I'm thinking back on that BBC video that you were talking about. I mean, he could have been facing the door as opposed to the camera facing the door, but then he would have been distracted by what was going on in front of him and no one else would be able to see it. I'm not sure what's best there.
I think each person's different. I think in your case, the distraction causes problems for you. For me, I like to be able to see what's going on, so I'm not snuck up on, I think. But probably what's best is to have your back to it. I just have a personal thing where I don't like having my back to doors in general, right?
Yeah.
I like to, I don't know what there's something there. Somebody out there listening is going to comment and tell me what psychologically is wrong with me that causes that.
I know what they're going to say.
What are they going to say?
It depends on what's on your screen.
I'm talking about in a meeting. Even in a meeting, I'll go into a conference room.
But nobody can see that you're on cat videos or, you know what I mean?
I don't look at cat videos when I'm sitting in a meeting room. I'm saying if I was actually in a meeting room, even in a conference room, I don't want to sit with my back to the door.
Really?
I don't. I'll try to get there so I can get a seat where I can see the door and see who's coming in. Otherwise, what I do is I get distracted by people's expressions. I wish I could give you a facial expression on audio, but you can imagine seeing someone else that you're looking at that sees who just walked in the room and the look on their face if they just saw like the president. And you're going, what the heck is going on? But you're trying to watch a presentation. I don't like that.
Yeah.
So I prefer to be able to, I can look up and be like, it's just Tom. Back to the presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. This is just a specific thing for me. All right. So we talked about being really close, being too far, getting your distancing right. What about how you speak or enunciate? Is it any different conference call, working from home versus in a meeting?
People always tell me that I talk too fast.
I get that as well.
My parents have always told me that I talk too fast. I try to slow down, but when I slow down, I sound like I'm slightly off.
Yeah, I think where I had to learn this was working with people overseas. So I had teams in different parts of the country that spoke English as a second or third language, and then you had to force yourself. And I worked with customers in Japan as well, and you repeat yourself 4 or 5 times, and you go, all right, I'm tired of repeating myself. What's broken here? Oh, I need to slow down. You need to enunciate. Maybe don't use like what's the thesaurus called? Thesaurus. Maybe there's an official one out there anyway. Whatever the thesaurus is, maybe don't use the fanciest word possible. Just pick like the generic word is fine. You don't have to use the fanciest possible word.
And slang.
Yeah, slang really gets I'm tickled pink. That's something that we might understand, but on the other side of the world they go, what is happening to this person?
Right. I remember you and I one time studying to go overseas, and we were visiting with some people from Seattle. And the girl was 12 years old, and she kept coming up to me and saying, just talk for a while. And I would talk, and then I would say, y'all. And she said, you do say y'all.
Okay, sidebar story. I actually had girls in high school that would call my house to listen to my dad talk. Folks in East Texas listening to this will appreciate it. They would call to listen to my dad and his redneck accent when we lived in Seattle. And I lost it, because I was young enough and I didn't pick up on the accent, or just shedded it because I didn't want to get ridiculed all the time. But They would call. They would talk to me. Yeah.
Well, and my mom always told me that I talked too fast, but I just thought she was crazy. And until the first time I actually had to give a speech, and there was a sign language person there, and I could see that. I mean, she was breaking a sweat trying to keep up with me. So I've learned to kind of slow down a little bit.
Maybe let's talk a little bit about embracing your inner teenager. If we're talking about failure, let's talk about how you embrace your that's the best way I can think of to fail, is to be just like my teenagers, which is play Call of Duty till 3 a.m. and then get up 5 minutes before my conference call and sit with coffee with the camera on looking like death. Or don't have the camera on
because you've worn the same shirt for the last 5 days.
That's right. That's
and
another.
it has pizza sauce all over the front of
Another
it.
good way to fail. Let's go ahead and wear that Harley Davidson shirt for like 12 days in a row and just add a new, stain to it every day. Coffee or barbecue or whatever.
It blows my mind on my day to do laundry. And I realize that my daughter has 4 shirts. My youngest has 4 shirts. And my son has no clothes. My middle one has no clothes in there. And I'm like, dude, how many days? Now, he's outsmarted the system, though. All of his shirts look exactly alike. He just likes white T-shirts,
Now,
so you can't tell.
So to be clear, like a person could operate this way and be very productive. I know software people that can do this and be very
You've
productive.
met our son, right?
But at the same time, I will say again, my opinion, okay?
Right.
Controversial opinion. My opinion, as much as I don't like the folks out there saying you got to get up at 4:30, I do think that if you go 12 days in a row in the same clothes and you just let yourself go, it has a psychological effect.
It absolutely does. And yeah. I find the same thing when so many moms ended up having to distance teach their kids with the iPads or whatever the schools are providing right now. So many of them are like, oh, great. Well, now we can just live in our pajamas all day. I mean, you can do that. And we have pajama days sometimes, but sometimes it can't be like a constant every
Right.
time thing.
Right.
Because when you get into that mode, then you get into when your body's not dressed, your brain doesn't wake up either.
Yeah. And anybody that knows me well knows that I'm preaching to myself. I have to get up and force myself to take a shower, get dressed, behave like a normal person. Because if I got my pick, I'd be just like my teenage son and be like...
Well, and occasionally you even change bathrobes. I mean, you have 3 now, right?
Just a backup plan. You have to have a backup plan just in case.
In case there's coffee on one.
And you got to have a backup. I get teased people that'll see like, hey, you're actually turning your camera on. You're wearing clothes. I go, yeah, I keep some clothes.
You keep a whole wardrobe
I keep fresh clothes right here
just in case.
So I'm not telling you to do what I do. I'm just saying, I'm saying from my own experience, I know after a couple of days of doing that, I can feel the psychological effect.
Right.
And it's better for me to get up, maintain a certain... So talk about your block scheduling. That's something we haven't hit on, but I think it really applies here.
So for me, I have to have a block schedule, which means that I have so many hours a day assigned for each thing. I get up 3 hours before I wake my kids up, and those first 3 hours are my time. Those are the time that I'm doing my creative writing, my own personal stuff. And then I wake the kids up, and each of them gets an hour. I have one that goes from 10 to 11, one that goes from 11 to 12, and then one that goes from 1 to 2, and that is their hour, anything they need help with. I am on call for them. After I get done with that, I then go into my nonprofit work for 2 hours. And once I'm done with that, I kind of have an open office time where the kids can come in and ask any questions they have before I lock it down and get back to work, usually on podcast related things or something like that.
So that goes into where I was going to go. Is if you want to fail, work like 2 hours a day and spend the rest of the day on, whatever video game you like to play. Speed runs of Mario Brothers 2. I like Mario Brothers 2. I'm the only person in the world that likes Super Mario Brothers 2. Everybody else likes all the other, but I like that game. But yeah, if you want to fail, work like a couple hours a day and spend the rest of the time on video games and goofing off, right?
Well, and this is going to sound awful, I know, but a failure for me is just having a list of 5 things that need to be done today. Because if I just have a list of 5 things that need to be done, I don't have a time that they need to be done. Those 5 things aren't going to get done. I need to be pretty specific with my time.
Yeah.
If it's important to me and I want to find time for it, I need to make time for it.
Well, and I think that block structure, that block schedule helps you prioritize time as well, right? And I do that. I mean, I'm pretty, I haven't done it as much working from home lately, but I've been pretty regimented in the office that I'll come in and I'll set my schedule for the week based on Monday. I'll look at my list. Here's my priorities. And then I'll look at my calendar and say, those don't make sense. Like, why am I spending 4 hours this week on these kinds of meetings when it's like number 9 on my priority list? And I'll try to switch things around.
Right.
I haven't had to do that as much because I've got extra time. And so I'm taking on, which goes to my next point, which is another good example of failure is, okay, one end of the spectrum, you've got work 2 hours a day, spend the rest of the day on Super Mario Brothers 2. The other end is work 10 hours a day, maybe work 12 hours a day, work from 8 till 10, don't see your family, don't work out, don't maintain any kind of regimen, and just get lost in your work. And then when you do see your family, scream and yell at them through whatever burnout rage you're in the middle of, right? Because that's what's going to happen if you try to maintain a schedule like that.
Right, and I think it's important. We are lucky to have each other so that we can tell each other, okay, obviously you are suffering some burnout, and I know that you may not see it, but you need to know that it's happening. I can see it in your eyes, right? And you and I do that for each other. But if you don't have that in your life, it's important to have some sort of community, somebody that's holding you accountable to make sure that you know to turn it off sometimes.
Yeah, it's actually a very common interview question that I give most people that I'm hiring is, how do you know when you've had enough? How do you know when you've hit a wall where you've hit max capacity, your maximum bandwidth? And I ask the question because I shouldn't give away the answer in case I'm interviewing somebody that listens to this, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's free information and it might help you. I ask the question because if your answer is, well, my projects start to get in a bind, no. Execution and projects have to be on time, brother.
Right.
Or you're done. That's not, I don't run a charity. I'm running business, right? So that's not an option for you, man. So what I'd like to hear is, well, I start to realize I start to see stress, evidence of stress.
I have this specific
I struggle
tick.
to sleep, or I'll get a twitch in my eye, for example. I'll figure out, that tells me you know yourself,
right?
That you understand where your boundaries are, and that helps. That's very valuable. Now, I don't ask new college grads that. Obviously, a new college grad doesn't know any of that stuff. But if I'm talking about a senior person that I'm trying to hire, if you don't understand yourself to be able to sort out, when you've had enough, and because I'm gonna help you find out how much you can handle, because I'm gonna keep flooding you with work until you feel that overloading.
Right, but even Chris's interview that aired, I believe, last week, Chris even says, don't rob your family, right?
Right.
Don't work and work and work and work and work and not ever see your family.
Right.
You've got to figure out what your priorities are, and you've got to stick with them. That for me, that's the block schedule. I mean, it helps me a lot because even the nonprofits that I work for, they know what time I serve them. They know what time I work for them.
Yep.
And I've got no problem if you call me or text me before then and say, are you available? I don't say no. I say I'm available at 3:00.
Yeah. And sticking to your guns on those things. I think there's a certain amount of discipline that really is kind of another underlying tone through all this is you're surrounded by distractions, whether it's your kids, your family, or food, or whatever the thing that distracts you is, it's around you, and you've got to find ways to go discipline yourself. And so, oddly enough, there's actually, in terms of structuring yourself from some distractions, there are apps and software and resources out there available to you. I was watching some videos on this past week, and there's some pretty cool things that are out there you can use to block websites. So if you can't stay off of Reddit, then you can actually set it up to where you can't make it so you can't access Reddit or whatever website or whatever distracts you, right? If you can't stay off Facebook, you can set things up to block you from 8 to 5 to prevent you from accessing it.
Right. And even when I'm having my personal writing time, I turn off my internet, I turn my phone on airplane mode, or I don't even take it into the same room because that will be a huge distraction.
Yeah.
And if I don't prioritize my own time, I can't expect anybody else to prioritize my time.
Anything else on the embracing your inner teenager you'd highlight?
I'm just glad that webcams don't have smell-o-vision yet, because sometimes my teenagers, at least.
Yeah, that definitely, that's a true statement.
Light a candle.
Yeah, that's a true statement. I think teenagers lack self-awareness, that's for sure.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine what I was like at that age. I'm sure it wasn't, I'm sure there's people listening that'll know. They can come comment. Okay, let's talk a little bit. It kind of goes the same way about just what happens when somebody just lets themselves go. And we kind of talked about it already, which is if you want to fail, just stop caring altogether, right? Go with the sleeveless Harley Davidson shirt. But what about getting some sunshine?
Oh, I have to have sunshine.
Yeah. Why?
Every day. For me, it's like it's not just a wake up thing. It's a feel rejuvenated, feel human. I could never live in Seattle. I couldn't live in a dark place. You and I had talked about possibly ing to Seattle or something at some point, and it just seems like
a long time ago. My current employer,
long
relaxed.
time ago, long time ago. it would just, I think that would just wear me out.
Yeah, I love Seattle. I enjoyed it up there. But what I liked about that area and just in general, you still got sun. It was just overcast and rainy quite a bit, but you could be outside for longer. Whereas in Texas, you got certain windows of the year that you can be outside, but you're just going to suffer. And I've had to just embrace the suffer.
Yeah, and for me, I would rather be hot in the sun than cold in the snow. That's just me.
Yeah, to each his own. Ultimately,
Absolutely.
getting out and getting some sunshine does have an effect on you psychologically.
Oh yeah, I would much rather go take a walk than get on the treadmill any day.
And some people, I think they have to discipline themselves because they just seem to be inside all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a kid like that too.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Is this episode really about one kid?
Well, no, there was also the Jack Russell Terrier.
Oh yeah, we do have that.
That's
kid
the
too.
other kid.
That's right. That's right. All right, and then maybe the other thing would be your physical well-being. You're talking about getting out in the sun, but I also notice that if I can maintain a regiment of, and this is one of those things where I could hear Jocko saying like, "Yeah, you should do that every day," and he's right in this way. I think if I can maintain some physical fitness, if I can get on the treadmill, get on the elliptical, get out, ride a bike, get out. Anything I can do that's because you're pent up. You're not spending any of this energy. And especially, and it's probably true for guys and girls, but it certainly is true for guys. I've taught my boys this, there's a certain amount of energy that every day you're just like gifted with. It's just surging through your body. And you need to put it someplace. And if you don't, it starts to affect your mental well-being, right?
Yeah.
So I need to go purge myself of some of that energy in some way. And I don't know, maybe our forefathers never had that problem because they were chasing deer, trying to figure out how they're going to survive, right? Or they're running from a tiger or something. I don't know.
Well, working from home is not anything new for me, but for you, you're used to being in a very large building, a large complex, and being able to go walk and get a cup of coffee and walk to go. So how have you been able to deal with all that?
I've tried to maintain a regiment from 11 to 12, or I'm sorry, from 12 to 1 is cardio. I try to get on the treadmill, get on the elliptical, get on the bike, do something where I'm physically active. If I can be outside, it's even better. But in general, if I can burn some energy, then I cycle. It has an effect on me cycle. I'm sure it affects you physically. You're better off, but it also affects me psychologically. I feel better the rest of the day.
Well, if the rain would ever slack off a bit, you can get back on the dirt bike trail or the mountain bike trail.
Yeah, I would prefer to be on a mountain bike. Anything I'm doing outside.
Right.
But still, even if you can't and you're just doing something in your house,
Right.
do something like that to stay physically active. I
Yeah.
think it does affect you psychologically. What about, we haven't really hit on this, but you start to feel isolated. I've had people reach out to me for just for video calls. People that I've never had video calls with that I text all the time are like, hey, can we FaceTime or can we do a video call on WhatsApp or something like this? And I'm like, okay, this must mean something's wrong. And then you realize, no, they're just trying to connect with people. And I'm like, good for you, man. That's healthy, right? And I'm on so many video conference calls that I don't feel a need for it maybe, or I am surrounded by people here on my little miniature compound. I'm using air quotes. But yeah, I think for some people, it's that might be a good solution for you to prevent some of that isolation feeling.
Right. And I've had a lot of contacts from people who their marriages weren't necessarily pristine before we started all the quarantine, and now marriages are...
Has it gone up or down?
Down.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's not good when you're stuck with somebody you don't like.
Yeah, I've heard some jokes about that we're going to wind up with a ton of kids after this, but I think you could wind up with some divorces too, right?
Well, and there's that freshman 15 when you're going into college. I wonder what it's going to be for quarantine. Quarantine 40?
Oh, good grief. That's one of the other reasons I'm like, I got to work out, man. This is not good. I need to purge myself. We think that what we really should have done is not had a toilet paper crisis. We should have had a carb crisis. For me, carbs are not available. You can't get them anywhere. I'd have been like, this is fantastic. Thanks for helping me with my discipline problems.
Right.
Okay, maybe the next point let's talk about is we have this unique opportunity where there is some extra time for people who are commute. At a minimum, you've pulled your commute time out. So there's all this time. So maybe another really great way to fail is just to totally waste it and do nothing. Is that
right? Go on Facebook and fuss and complain about not having enough time.
Right, as opposed to figuring out. So why does a person do that? Why would a person do that instead of spending this time bettering themselves? Now, okay, keep in mind, I realize there's challenges. One of my more frustrating things is to see things out on social media with celebrities, or they're talking about, look at me, I'm learning how to do this and I'm learning how to do that. And they're in a giant kitchen. There's no kids anywhere. That's not realistic. You should have a kid running through the house with underwear on its head with something lit on fire.
Right.
Now I'm like, okay, that looks realistic and practical, right?
But if you have things in your life that you've always wanted to do and you haven't found time for it right now, that is something within your grasp that doesn't cost a whole lot of money. I mean, how many people have you heard that wanted to write a book? They've always wanted to write a book, or they've always wanted to run a marathon, or they've always You have this gift of time right now. Are you spending it sitting in front of Netflix drinking beer, or are you spending it on what you actually have a passion for?
Yeah, and I think that's really what it gets down to, is that'd be another example of working from home failure would be to waste the opportunity, waste the time. You actually have time if you'll structure your time and take advantage of it and use it.
Right, and it blows my mind when I'm watching people on Facebook, and I'll flip on Facebook twice a day. And it's usually just for news updates, see how people are doing. I've got some friends with sick family. But when I go on there and I realize that people have been on there complaining all day, griping, fussing, complaining all day about not having enough time to do what they want to do, what they need to do, everything falling behind, I'm like, get off Facebook. Go do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that really what it comes down to is we talked about discipline a little bit, and this is one of those cases where it probably breaks into a time management thing that we'd have to spend a lot, I could spend probably 4 hours talking about time management. We're not going to do that today. But time management, you really have to break down the next point. What is the next thing that prevents you from doing it? If you want to learn Spanish, for example, and it's just been on your to-do list on your whiteboard or on your refrigerator or whatever, if you want to as just learn Spanish, good luck. That might work for some people. For some people, it's just going to be there forever, right? If I write learn Spanish as an action item for myself, it's just never going to happen.
Right.
But if I'll say download the Duolingo app, or download whatever, or what's the
small actionable steps.
What's the one you can buy, the Rosetta Stone, right? So you can, whatever those steps are.
Duolingo is free.
Duolingo's free, and it works very well. Just as an example,
right.
Finding that little solution that you can, and take that next step. It's what's the next step you need to take,
right.
Not what the finish line looks like.
Exactly. For me, I have to go, where do I want to be in a year? And then break that down to what does that mean I need to do in 6 months, 3 months, this week. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. One last point that I want to make that helps me. That's probably the unique thing for me, and then we'll get to our minutia point. One of the things that helps me, and it's probably just a crazy thing that's about me, I am a whiteboard person. I don't think strategically by myself as well as I do with other people. And it doesn't necessarily have to be specific people. So I will drag you into a conversation that says, okay, you don't know anything about this, but if I can describe it to you, I'm probably going to figure it out for myself, right? So I actually have whiteboards installed at various places in the house for this reason.
Right.
So that makes it a little more of a productive home office, because folks that know me in the office would know I'm the same way. Like if I can stand up and get to a whiteboard, I will. And that's because, giving them some secrets about me, I just think better that way. I think better on my feet, drawing things and talking through things.
Well, you realize that you don't have everything figured out unless you
Not at all.
Unless you can talk someone else through it until they understand it. If they understand it, you must be doing a pretty good job communicating it.
A couple things can happen. I can get 2 steps into something and realize this is a horrible decision, and erase it and say, sorry, I said anything. Rarely does that happen, but on occasion. Or more than likely, I'll get 2 steps into describing it to somebody and be like, oh, it needs to be like this.
That's the flaw.
And I didn't uncover it until so that may be a unique thing for me. My point is, whatever you think about your time when you're most productive in your normal office environment, and can you duplicate or reproduce that? A whiteboard's not that expensive. It's not that difficult to go mount that thing on your wall someplace. That's an easy thing that you can go do to improve your productivity. That's been helpful for me anyway. And I know the whole family has been using some of those as well.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay. So you got 1 point, and hopefully we've already covered that, right? But what's the one minutia point that you reflect back to? And you're going to talk to the 25-year-old version of you that's starting to work from home more frequently. What's the thing that you'd whisper in your ear and say, if you could master this, your productivity is going to go through the roof working at home?
For me, it is probably my own self-esteem, because I have a tendency to think that other people who have these big fancy offices, have the big fancy paycheck, and have all of the approval of bosses and everything else are in a better position than I am working from home. There is a lot of motivation that has to go into self-motivation, that has to go into making what I do work, because there is no one saying you're doing a good job. If you don't have your own back, then you can find yourself in a bind quickly and giving up.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good point because you're isolated, so it
Absolutely
can make that even worse. It's a good point. I think for me, it's the having a consistent the space, the home office structure or the actual physical space, the office setup. When I get that productive and get that space correct, I'm okay and I can be productive. If I tried to sit down at my favorite lounge chair in front of the TV, man, the temptation's probably too. Might as well just set a bag of Doritos right next to me and just assume I'm going to accomplish nothing today, and give me some Super Mario Brothers 2 to play, and then I'm useless. I don't know why I picked that game so much because it's such a rarity. I'm gonna hashtag that one, so I put it out there for people to go. I actually like the game. I may be the only one out there that does. All right, so hopefully this helps. It's kind of our take on working from home, and something we've done for a long time and been pretty productive. We didn't actually talk much about why we started working from home so much. In my case, because I'm developing software, I had to. It's the only way I could get anything done. So I think it's opportunity. I find working from home is a good thing if you learn to master it. Right. My productivity goes way up when I'm working from home, because if I'm working on something really that doesn't require other people, if it's something that I need to go, software or writing or PowerPoint presentations, those types of things, my productivity goes way up if I'm doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I was raised by a stay-at-home mom, and it was something that I always wanted to do. And when I found myself in the unique position of being able to do that, I wanted to do that, but I also didn't want to lose the me to my kids. I see way too many moms that just completely lose themselves to their kids, and I decided to fight that from day one. I wanted to make sure that I maintain my own identity outside of my kids.
Man, that's a podcast episode all by itself. I'll have to leave that one for another day. I think that would be worthwhile to cover. Let's end it. I want to remind folks to go subscribe if you're enjoying the podcast. Go wherever you rate or wherever you listen to your podcast. Go out and give us a rating and subscribe so you get automatic notifications.
We're even on YouTube now.
We did start a YouTube channel, but it's not video. It's just it's a time problem. Well, no, that's a part of that. Also, like having a camera on me is something I'm gonna have to get over and recognize. But go out there and leave mean, nasty comments as people do on YouTube. That's my negative perception I have of it, but I need to get over that.
Yeah.
I need to get past it. Because there are some really good YouTube channels that I value.
Absolutely.
Where there's good communities.
Yeah, we have a lot of them that we watch.
So I don't have any specific restrictions on those comments. I'll leave something crazy out there. Go and get your quarantine haircut this week. I've already done mine.
Oh, can you post that picture? Post the picture, Brent.
I don't. So it's one thing to just. I don't mind posting a picture of my head shaved because I've shaved my head many times.
No, that's not the picture.
But the idea, usually when I shave my head, I usually will shave it into a mohawk, just to mess with my boys, to mess with my kids. And in this case, the length of it winds up. I just look like a cockatoo.
Post the picture.
All right, you guys put some comments out there and encourage me. Maybe I will. We'll see about it. You guys have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Bye.